But on this topic, I always have to come back to the Garden of Eden and the two trees.
Yeah.
Because our goal as parents is to get to know the Father as best we can and learn how he relates to us as a loving Father. And then ask the question, well, what does that mean for me towards my kids?
Right.
And how can I take his methods and implement them in our parenting?
Right. Yeah. How can I mirror his actions and his choices as a father
Right.
as best as I can for my kids?
Yeah. What are his values? Why does he do what he does?
Yeah.
And so when you look in the Garden of Eden, you see very early on, you see his heart for his creation. You see his heart for people.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you ask the question, why did God create Adam and Eve? I think it boils down to that he was looking for somebody to experience his love. Because he, within himself, there's this theological term, perichoresis. That means, and some people will call that like the circle dance.
Yeah.
But it basically means that like the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit were experiencing perfect community and unity and sharing of love
Yeah.
within themselves. And so they looked for an opportunity to have somebody else be a part of that.
Yeah.
And so they created the world and they created Adam and Eve. And so Adam and Eve come on the scene and the Lord puts them in this perfect paradise, this perfect garden, creates just for them.
Yeah.
And in it, he puts two trees. And he put the tree of life and he put the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it's easy to read that story and think, man, I wish that second tree would have been somewhere else.
Right. Way up high on like a super steep mountain,
Put
hard
it
to get to.
somewhere, put it somewhere where people just wouldn't have found it.
Right.
But it was absolutely necessary that he created both trees.
Yeah.
Because the Lord's desire for them was that they would be both the recipients and the extension of his love, that they would receive his love, that they would love him in return,
Yeah.
and then that they would carry his love, his goodness, and ultimately his kingdom and spread it to the rest of the world.
Right.
That was their mandate.
Yeah.
And the thing about love is that love by definition is to will the good of another. And if love is to will the good of another, then love by nature requires a choice.
Right. Yep.
They
That can't exist without choice.
Yeah. Yep. Without a will, you just can't love. Love, like you said, it ceases to exist.
Yeah.
So God created people. He wanted there to be it's a continual flow of giving and receiving love. The way he knew that within himself.
Yeah.
He wanted us to be a part of that. So he created Adam and Eve, and they had this perfect union with him, living in a perfect paradise. They had everything they needed. But the only way that they would be free to choose to love him or even to obey him is if they were equally as free to disobey him. So he didn't create an environment of control. He created an environment of freedom.
Yeah.
And so he put the two trees there, and he said, don't eat from that one.
Right. He literally was like, all right, this is an option for you. This is why I don't want you to choose this option,
Right.
but you can have everything else. Like
Yep.
everything is accessible for you, even this, if
Yep.
this is your choice. But here's why I don't want you to choose this. You know, he
Yeah.
gave a very plain
Yep.
explanation of like,
Yeah.
this is all for you. Please leave this one alone.
Yeah. He wanted a healthy relationship, and the foundation of a healthy relationship is love. It needs respect,
Yeah.
trust, honor, and all of those things disappear in the absence of choice.
Right. Yeah. It all just becomes control.
Yeah. And we become puppets
Right.
and robots,
Yeah.
and that wasn't his vision. It wasn't his desire.
Yep.
So he created an environment of freedom, and he set boundaries, and he let them experience the outcome of their choice. So the question then becomes for us, well, what does that mean for us as parents? what does it look like to create an environment of freedom in which our kids are free to make the choices they're going to make within the boundaries and the limits that we've set?
Yeah.
And how do we as parents go through life letting our kids fail and make mistakes, not letting it affect our love for them, and using their choices and their mistakes and their failures as opportunities not to control them and try to make them do what we want them to do,
Yeah.
but to teach them self-control and to
Right.
teach them the value of responsibility and making better choices.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I feel like it's one of the hardest things as a parent. And I know we've only scratched the surface because we just have young kids,
Right.
but allowing your kids to fail is super tough
Yeah.
because most of the time, especially with our aged kids, like we can see the mistake coming. You know, it's like, okay, if you're going to jump off of this thing, that's probably going to hurt, you
Right.
know, but like if you are, you know, of course, if they're going to jump off of like a super tall thing, we're not going to let
Right.
them jump and break their legs, you
Yeah.
know, but if it's just like a minor thing, we'll let it happen. You're like, you can try that,
Yep.
but I'm going to let you know it's probably not going to go super well. But even like allowing those things, it's just like, oh, you're like bracing for the impact. And I can only imagine that as our kids get older, that it's going to be really
Yeah.
challenging, you know, because we've lived through, as parents, we've lived through those things. We've made the wrong choices. I know I had to learn the hard way for most things, you know,
Sure.
where I made choices that were not the choices that I think my parents would have preferred me to make, but I did it anyways because I'm stubborn and I
Sure.
wanted to. And then I came back and I was like, you were right.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I have seen those times even more now being parents ourselves, you know, you see how much work goes into parenting when
Yeah.
you become a parent yourself
For sure.
and how much grief I must have caused my
Sure.
parents, you know, like, oh, like there have been multiple times where I've texted my mom and been like, I'm sorry, or thank you for doing all these things for me. But yeah, that's just a really hard but necessary part of being a parent is creating those, like you said, those boundaries, those safe places for them to be able to experience those freedoms, whether they choose wisely
Yeah.
or not is up to them, but really giving them the opportunity to genuinely choose themselves and experience the outcome either way.
Yeah. And as kids get older too, you kind of change the landscape of the boundaries that they have.
Right.
And that it's like pretty tight when they're really young. But like right now, like you said, our kids are pretty young. Our oldest is 7. And so we're not dealing with like major life altering decisions that they're
Right.
making.
Yeah. Like her consequences are not going to be like, you might go to jail.
Right.
It's going to be like, you might not get to
Yeah.
read a book tonight
Like
for
we're
bedtime.
not, yeah. Or like we're just not going to do like any video games
Yeah.
for a couple days,
Yeah.
you know? But as they get older, like we do step into those more serious potential outcomes.
Yeah.
Like you said, like you could go to jail if you do this, or, you know, you could get pregnant, or you could X, Y, or Z.
Yep.
So our thought is, well, let's work really hard while they're young to help them understand self-control
Yes.